Welcome back to Truth Over the Noise. My name is Nathan Woltman. I am the network director of TIL Radio Network, and I'm joined with Trey Cochran, one of my best friends from church, and we are so glad to be a part of your lives here at Truth Over the Noise. This is a podcast talking about current topics and issues that are going on in your life, and coming from two guys that are just like, hey, let's figure this out, put this thing together. And we're going to do that through the biblical world lens and looking through God's word as we find those answers. Well, on this episode of Truth Over the Noise, we're going to do a special here, and Trey Cochran is going to give his testimony, and we're looking very much forward to that here. And so I want you to stay tuned, listen in as he gives his testimony in this episode. And so Trey, I just want you to take it away and tell us your testimony here in this episode of Truth Over the Noise.
Glad to. My testimony really starts before I was born. I like to tell people that I was been in church since 9 months before I was born, because my mom was in the choir. She was the WMU director. She was the church cook. Anytime the doors were open, my mother was at the church. And when she first found out she was pregnant with me, I was not planned. I was a complete surprise. And it was a very difficult pregnancy because she was on bed rest for 8 months while she was pregnant with me. And one wrong move and I would have been gone. And when I was born, there was a lot of issues. I can't remember exactly what they were, but there was a lot of issues where doctors didn't think I was going to leave the hospital. And my mother was very faithful, stayed very faithful in prayer, and had every belief that God was going to use me and that God wasn't done with me yet. I, of course, as you can tell, eventually got out of the hospital. When I was a year and a half old, I got a very bad virus and started just getting sick all the time and couldn't hold anything down. And my mom says that I was so skinny that you could count the vertebrae on my back if I was laying on my stomach. Once again, doctors thought that I wasn't going to make it. They thought that my pediatrician actually wrote failing to thrive on one of my reports, which basically meant that he didn't think I was going to live that much longer. My mom, once again, was very faithful in prayer, and she knew that God wasn't done with me yet. Then we move on to my school years, where my kindergarten teacher told my mother that she didn't think I would ever learn how to read or write. And I'll get more into that later on about how I proved that one wrong. But there was a lot of people in my life that doubted me. But one thing that I learned early in life is that God doesn't give up on you. He doesn't give up on anyone. And my mother didn't give up on God no matter what struggles I was facing. And growing up in the church, when I was 6 years old, I thought I knew what it was like to be a Christian. I thought I understood it. And so at 6 years old, I walked up in a little old Baptist church. I walked up to the front, took the preacher by the hand, told him that I had accepted Christ as my Savior and that I wanted to be a Christian, and did the typical old Baptist church, stood up at the front. Everybody came up, right hand of fellowship, stuck it out, shook people's hand. And after that, I thought I was good. Nobody told me what was next. I didn't understand what was going to happen next. I thought my life was going to be great after I accepted Christ. It wasn't. My mother was the one that took me to church. My sister and I to church throughout my entire childhood. My dad worked a lot when I was younger. He worked for Delta Airlines for almost 30 years. And when I was growing up, he really even if he was off on a Sunday, which didn't really happen very much. He had worked late on Saturday night, so he wouldn't go to church with us. So everybody, I heard all through life how the father was supposed to be the spiritual leader for the family. And I hate to say it, but I didn't know what that meant because I didn't have that. My father wasn't my spiritual leader. My mother was. And school was always rough for me because when I was younger, I was diagnosed with a disability called motor apraxia. It means it's a disability that affects my motor skills, like reading, writing. I can write, but it's chicken scratch. I really can't write that well at all. Things that were simple for others were very, very hard for me. Like, I didn't know, this is a bit embarrassing to say, but I didn't know how to tie my shoes till I was in middle school because my motor skills and like my fingers really, I didn't know what to do with them. So things that were simple to other people really were not that simple for me. And that led to, in my early years, that led to a lot of bullying. Kids were mean back then, man. Thank God there was no social media back in our day. Sounds so old saying that. But kids were mean. And it really, like, it made me hate school. Like, it really did. I didn't ever want to go to school. When I was little in elementary school, my mom was a school nurse. I would go up to her office as many times as I could until she caught on to what I was doing and sent me to class. I really didn't want to be there because I needed a small learning setting where I could get like where I would be able to ask the teacher a question and get an answer and have it explained to me. And I couldn't do that in a room with 30 kids. It's not that I wasn't a good student, I just didn't apply myself. When I was in elementary school, there was a couple of years where I was a AB honor roll student. I really feel like I could have done better in school, and I wish I would have because I wish that I could have gone to college. I could have finished college if I would have applied myself more. But unfortunately, I was not able to finish college, which, by the way, did get into college. No matter how many people told me that I wouldn't be able to, I did. More on that later. When I was in middle school, that's when my family got a computer for the first time. Middle school boy, a computer, access to a computer. I'm sure a lot of you can see where this is going. When I was in middle school, I heard some kids talking about a particular website, went on it, wish I never would have done it because that led to a battle with lust and pornography that I regret to this day. I knew better. I knew that I knew better, but it just it sucked me in. And it was a long battle that I had to fight for years. I would go to church on Sunday, nobody would know. I would just be because even though my mother knew, she wouldn't tell people about it because I did get caught by her and my sister, and I regretted it. Like, I still regret it. I will regret that for the rest of my life, going on that website for the first time. And because I had to explain to my wife how I had made that mistake and how while I may have physically saved myself for her, I didn't mentally save myself for her, which is what I'm supposed to do. I regret it, truly. Um, it was a battle that even though I beat it, I still have to fight that battle to this day. And it's a constant battle. It's an everyday battle. I'm thankful that I beat it. I'm thankful that what used to have a hold on me doesn't anymore. And I'm just extremely grateful for that. Also, if you're out there and you're struggling with that, please find somebody to talk to about that. find an accountability partner, one of your friends, somebody that you admire. Just go up to them and tell them what you're dealing with. Because if they're honest with you, they're gonna tell you that they've struggled with the same thing as well. Because I don't know many men that have not struggled with that in their life. And then we get to my high school years, where I was wanting to get out of school. Like I was ready to be done with school. I didn't care about school. Oh, I skipped over the most important part of my life. 8th grade year, when I was 14 years old. I had gone through a little spiritual rebellion. Like, I didn't want to go to church. I didn't really care about going to church. I really it was at that point where church started seeming like a chore, because, every Sunday, every Wednesday I was there. And Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, it was just, I was there. But when I was 14, it was in late 2002. I had started feeling that there was something missing in my life. Like, I had rededicated my life so many times, and I started having meetings with our pastor. Showed me that I didn't really know what salvation meant. I didn't really know, like, I hadn't developed my own faith in the Lord. When I was 6 years old, all I knew was what I had been taught by other people. And when I was 14, that's when I truly accepted Christ into my life. And that was in December of 2002. That time I truly, truly meant what I said. And for the first time, it was like, that was the salvation prayer where they were my words and I meant every single word of it. I can't say the same when I was 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, it was just a prayer I'd been taught at church by other people. And after I accepted Christ, I got my spiritual rebellion was over. I was heavily involved in the youth group. Then I didn't really see myself as a leader, though. I didn't see myself as somebody who had potential to be a leader in the youth group. I just thought of myself as somebody that was there. The first youth minister that I ever had who really, like, saw the potential in me to be a leader in the group was a guy named Jason Arrington. I tell people, he's the greatest youth minister I ever had. He truly invested in me and not only saw my potential as a leader, but encouraged me to capitalize on it and encouraged me to just be the leader that he knew I could be and that he could tell that God had equipped me to be. Jason is a great man, a great man. He lives in the West Georgia area, so he and I still see each other occasionally. But every time I see him, it's just like we saw each other yesterday. And he always checks on me, asks me how the family's doing, just gives me a big old hug every time. And every time I see him, I always make sure to thank him for everything that he did for me, because truly, if it was not for that man, I truly don't know if I would be where I'm at right now, if it was not for the investment that man made in my life. One day where we all have these, what you call, mountaintop moments of faith, where, like, you have no choice but to fully depend on God, because you know for a fact if you depend on yourself, something's going to go wrong. I literally had a mountaintop faith moment because of Jason Arrington. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. We went on a youth retreat. I can't remember where we went, but he had said that he had a surprise for us that day, which we thought, it's cool. Like, are we going to go whitewater rafting? Are we going to go out on a scavenger hunt? Like, what are we going to do? He took us to the top of a mountain and told us that we were going to rappel down. I am at that time 5'6", a little bit over 200 pounds. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not. He said, yeah, you are. I said, And everybody had gone down, and I was the last one up there. The entire time I'm looking at him and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I trust you. But in my head, I was like, I'm about to die. This is it. This is the end. So they hook me up. I take the first step. I'm on the first step, and he tells me to let go with one hand. So I let go with one hand, and then he tells me to let go with the other hand. So the one that I had let go with before, I put that hand on the rope and let go with the other hand. He said, now I want you to let go with both hands. I looked at him and I said, I thought to myself, now I understand why he wanted us to sign the waiver. So I let go with both hands. I leaned back and I was still scared to death, and he could tell. He looked at me. He said, Trey, do you trust me? I said, yeah. He said, do you trust God? Do you trust me that I would not put you in any danger if I did not think this was safe? I said, yeah. He said, now do you trust that God's going to take care of you through this? And I said, yeah. He said, then go ahead. So I rappelled down that mountain, and it was a rush of adrenaline. I will never do it again, but it was just such a rush. And that's when I knew, like, number one, God's going to take care of me. I always have to have faith that God's going to take care of me. Number two, I have to trust that the people that God has placed in my life would never put me in a situation that where they knew, where they thought I wasn't safe. And I still remember the day that Jason told us that he was going to resign as our youth minister. We were in Sunday school. He told us, I got out of that room as fast as I could. And I went and saw my mom, who was in the nursery. I broke down because that man was and still is one of the biggest role models that I've had in my life. One of my biggest mentors, the person that's invested in me a lot more than other people have. He's just, I did not see what was going to happen to me if I didn't have him as a part of my life. And I was just devastated, devastated. Shortly after he left Sardis, my mom and I made the difficult decision to change churches, which was very, very difficult. Um, because my sister and I both grew up at Sardis, and I think my sister and I were either the sixth or seventh generation of my family to grow up at Sardis Baptist Church. So my family has a long line at Sardis Baptist Church. I've got so much family buried out there in the cemetery of Sardis Baptist Church. My great grandfather and great grandmother are out there. My grandfather and my grandmother are out there. My great great grandfather and great grandmother are out there. It's just it was a hard transition. But thankfully we landed at a great church. Palmetto Baptist was a great church for me and my family. My mom still goes there every Sunday. It was really a great church where I was introduced to missions for the first time. I had heard about it growing up, but I didn't get the opportunity to go on mission trips until I went to Palmetto. Got to go on several mission trips. I went to Ohio, Maryland, Indiana, Arkansas, Illinois, and it really made a huge impact on me. And the guy behind those mission trips was a guy named Chris Gould. He was the choir director at Palmetto Baptist for many years. And if you ask anyone that was around Palmetto Baptist Church at the same time Mr. Chris was, you will not hear a bad word about that man. And it was just, he was an amazing, amazing human, a great role model, a fantastic, not only choir director, but like an amazing friend. Like he invested so much into that church. And when he passed away, it was just awful because it was very sudden. He suffered a fall and went downhill from there. And it was just awful. And then moving from that, we'll go to 2020. What a year that was. We, all I could do during the lockdown was go to work and come home. Go to work, come home. Go to work, come home. Couldn't really do anything else during the lockdown. But thankfully, my nephew spent a lot of the lockdown with my parents and I, so he and I just got to play video games a lot, which was awesome. He tried to get me to learn how to play Call of Duty. I really tried. I really did. I couldn't get the hang of that. He would beat me every time, but I would beat him in 2K, so we were even. In late 2019, before the COVID lockdown hit, I started feeling like, as great a church as Palmetto Baptist was, I just wasn't being poured into there. They didn't have anything for people that were in the same season of life that I was. At that point, I was in my 30s and single. And at that point, if after the high school seniors class, the next level up that they had was the young married class. And there was nothing in between at that time. And I felt like I needed to be somewhere where there was a thriving young adults ministry where I could really get poured into more than I was at Palmetto. Still love Palmetto. Don't have a bad word to say about that church or anybody that goes there. That church is amazing. It's doing fantastic now. And that's when I started going to Crossroads Church in Sharpsburg. Crossroads Church, absolutely loved it. Have Still have so many fond memories and great friendships from that place. And when I went there, I had zero intention of getting involved with the youth ministry because I had served in youth ministry from the time I graduated till up until the time I left Palmetto when I was a little 31. So that would have been 13 years that I'd been serving in the student ministry. And it was consistent. I didn't take summers off. I didn't take years off. Like, I served and I was very consistent in serving. And I'm very thankful that I was because I met some of my best friends serving in that ministry. I have a friend group of 5 guys: me, Leighton Cannon, Alex Gould, Mark Grace, Joe Milner. I was a leader in the Palmetto Baptist Youth Group. Leighton Cannon came in as a student. Joe Milner came in as a student. Alex Gould came in as a student. And Mark Grace came in as a student. Each and every one of those guys became my brothers. I love those guys so much. I treasure the friendships that I have with them. And I am Hold on to your seats, people. I'm 38. Leighton is 28. I'm 10 years older than him, and he's the next oldest. I am so thankful for those guys because friendships like that don't happen every day. That's not a friendship, that's a brotherhood. And that's a relationship that only God could have made when he did. I love those guys. They were all groomsmen at my wedding. Leighton got married. Me, Alex, and Mark were all groomsmen at his wedding. And Leighton and I actually got to go on a mission trip to Italy together through Crossroads. And that's a memory that I'm always going to have. And then in July of 2022, there was a girl at Crossroads who I was attracted to. I had a crush on her for a while, and I went up and asked her out. She said no, and that put me in a very, very dark place. I really didn't think that I was ever going to meet anybody. I did not think that there was anybody out there for me. I thought I was destined to die alone and that nothing would ever happen. And I was very open with Leighton about this. And he encouraged me to download Bumble. I did. And I thank God that I did because in September of 2022, I got a notification that somebody had liked my profile. And I logged on to Bumble and I saw that the person who had liked my profile was a young lady by the name of Amber Harris. She lived in Carrollton, Georgia, which was an hour away from where I lived in Fayetteville at the time. And I am forever thankful for that moment because Amber Harris is now Amber Cochran. We had our first date on October 13th, 2022 at the young adult service at Crossroads Church. We went to the young adult service at my church and then we went out for pizza and then we parked in a Tractor Supply parking lot and just talked until well after midnight. That's a night that I'll never forget because that I got home from that date and I told my mom, I just went out with your daughter-in-law. And after that night, we became official, started seeing each other as much as we could. I proposed to her in July of 2023. We got married March of 2024. I realized that I'm going to move back a little bit and talk about some more about Crossroads Youth because I realized that almost got to that, but then backtracked a little bit more. When I went to Crossroads, I really had no intention of serving in youth because I was just burnt out with serving. Like, I wanted to go somewhere where I could just lay low, where I could just be a face in the crowd for the first time in a long time. Thankfully, God had other plans. I was approached by one of the guys who was in the small group that I was in at Crossroads, and he said, "Hey, I heard that you've led in the youth group a lot at your old church." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Do you have any interest in doing it here?" I told him not really. He said, "Well, would you do me a favor and just come to a leader meeting about like a leader interest meeting about potentially getting involved?" I told him, "Yeah." I said, "I don't really want to, but I'll come to the meeting." And I thank God I did because at that meeting I met Crossroads' new youth minister. His name was Jesse Norton. Great man, great family. He was also one of my groomsmen at my wedding. And he has a heart for the next generation that I haven't seen in a while. He loves these kids. He invests so wisely, and he invests in these kids so much, and he does it so well, and he loves his leaders so well. His family truly appreciates the leaders and the opportunity that they've been blessed with to make a difference in the young people's lives. And they're the real deal, and you can see it. Through Crossroads Youth, I was able to meet some of the best kids that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. We had a small group every Sunday night at the Bridges house. We called it the Bridges house. And I tell you what, these kids are on fire for the Lord. And a bunch of them are still making a difference right now in the world. And these kids are going to be world changers. I still call them kids, but they are adults now. But I love seeing what they're doing because they're going to change the world and they're going to keep God at the center of their lives, which is exactly what we always prayed that they would do as their leaders. If the kids are still putting God at the center of their lives when they're adults, then we know we did a good job because those kids, I saw a bunch of those kids get saved. I saw a bunch of those kids get baptized. And I saw a bunch of those kids just catch the fire of the Lord and just want to go out there and put that fire in other people and just make a difference in this world. And that's what they're doing now. And I could not be more proud of them. Now, the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026 was a rough road for me. In November of 2025, the day before Thanksgiving, I spent that day in the hospital where I was diagnosed with a kidney stone that it was going to require surgery to move. And they scheduled the surgery for December 4th. Unfortunately, they were not able to get the kidney stone, and they told me that I was going to have a stent put in order to get a path cleared for the kidney stone for them to be able to get the kidney stone. I had to go through four separate procedures before they were finally able to get the kidney stone out in the middle of January. And at that point, I had a tube coming out of my back from the middle of December until the middle of January, and I could not lay on my back because it would make me very uncomfortable, and I just felt like I was useless. I felt like I couldn't be productive. I felt like I was half the person that I was before all of this happened. And in January, they were able to get the kidney stone out. Thank the Lord. I felt great since. And then on February 13th, I found out that my grandmother, who had suffered a fall in December, was, I received the news that her organs were starting to shut down and that they gave her at most 10 days. And I found that out right after I got off of work. And I just remember crying because my grandmother was just a special lady. She was such a pillar of faith for my family. Thankfully, I am going to see her again because she passed away when she was 93. She accepted Christ when she was 13. She spent 80 years of her life following Jesus. And that's a legacy of faith that was passed down through our family. My grandmother was one of my favorite people, and it truly broke my heart when I got the news that she was probably going to pass away soon. The next day was Valentine's Day. I had that day off. My wife and I were planning on going out to lunch because we had plans that evening. And as soon as we found out about my grandmother, we changed our plans. Instead of going to lunch, we went and saw my grandmother so that I could sit with her and be with her one more time. I got to sit with my grandmother. I got to tell her how much I loved her. And I got to tell her just what an honor it was to be her grandson because it truly was. I held her hand, and even though she wasn't awake, she was still there because she was squeezing my hand, and I could feel it. I got the call on Friday, went and saw her on Saturday, and she passed away Sunday night at 10:47. And that's a void that's consistent. I've wanted to call her so many times since, and it's been hard to accept that she's not here anymore. Grief is a funny thing. That thankfully my first this is my this isn't my first experience with grief, but it's the one that's hit me the hardest because I loved this lady with all my heart. I loved this lady. When I was younger, people would always ask me, because I grew up around the Palmetto area, which is where my family had grew up, and they knew all of my family all the way back. So they would always ask me, "Are you William Cochran's son?" And I would always say, "Yeah, I am." And that was either followed by, "Oh Lord," or "How much trouble is your daddy getting into these days?" And later on in life, when they would ask me if I was William Cochran's son, I'd say, "I am, but I kind of like to be referred to as Hilda Cochran's grandson." And they would laugh and they would say, "You ain't gonna find a better lady than Miss Hilda." And they were right. So yeah, that is my testimony from birth to now. It definitely hasn't been an easy road. There's always going to be people that doubt you in your life. But one thing that my sister would tell me, let your haters be your motivators, which to me means the people that doubt you, don't let them pull you back. Let them push you to prove them wrong, because there's a lot of people in my life that I had to prove wrong. My kindergarten teacher said I would never learn how to read or write. By the 6th grade, I was reading on a 10th grade reading level. In middle school, I took some standardized math tests and I tested off the charts in math, which meant that I tested on a post high school math level. People said I wouldn't graduate on time. I did. Now, I'm not going to act like I was a straight A student because I wasn't, but I love telling people that I graduated in the top 10 of my class because there was only 10 of us in my graduating class. So I really didn't have a choice but to be in the top 10. So yeah, that's my testimony. Thank you so much for bearing with me throughout my long-windedness and throughout my tears. Next episode, we will hear the testimony of my good friend, Mr. Waltman. And this has been Truth Over the Noise. We will see y'all next week.
For more information about Truth Over the Noise podcast, go to truthoverthenoise.com or tilradio.org. You can find more information there. And this has been a production of Truth Over the Noise podcast and TIL Radio Network.